Chapter 17 of Book of the Damned. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Patrick McAfee. The Book of the Damned by Charles Fort. Chapter 17a. The vast dark thing that looked like a poised crow of unholy dimensions. Assuming that I shall ever have any readers, let him, or both of them, if I shall ever have such popularity as that, note how dim that bold black datum is at the distance of only 2 chapters. The question: was it a thing or the shadow of a thing? Acceptance either way calls not for mere revision, but revolution in the science of astronomy. But the dimness of the datum of only 2 chapters ago, the carved stone disk of Tarbes, and the rain that fell every afternoon for 20, if I haven't forgotten myself, whether it was 23 or 25 days, upon one small area. We are all Thomsons, with brains that have smooth and slippery, though corrugated surfaces, or that all intellection is associative, or that we remember that which correlates with a dominant. And a few chapters go by, and there's scarcely an impression that hasn't slid off our smooth and slippery brains of Leverrier and the planet Vulcan. There are 2 ways by which irreconcilables can be remembered, if they can be correlated in a system more nearly real than the system that rejects them, and by repetition and repetition and repetition. Vast black thing like a crow poised over the moon. The datum is so important to us because it enforces, in another field, our acceptance that dark bodies of planetary size traverse this solar system. Our position: that the things have been seen. Also that their shadows have been seen. Vast black thing poised like a crow over the moon. So far it is a single instance. By a single instance we mean the negligible. In Popular Science 34-158, Serviss tells of a shadow that Schroeder saw in 1788 in the lunar Alps. First he saw light, but then, when this region was illuminated, he saw a round shadow where the light had been. Our own expression: that he saw a luminous object near the moon, that part of the moon became illuminated, and the object was lost to view, but that then its shadow underneath was seen. Serviss explains, of course. Otherwise he'd not be Professor Serviss. It's a little contest in relative approximations to realness. Professor Serviss thinks that what Schroeder saw was the round shadow of a mountain in the region that had become lighted. He assumes that Schroeder never looked again to see whether the shadow could be attributed to a mountain. That's the crux. Conceivably, a mountain could cast a round, and that means detached, shadow in the lighted part of the moon. Professor Serviss could, of course, explain why he disregards the light in the first place. Maybe it had always been there in the first place. If he couldn't explain, he'd still be an amateur. We have another datum. I think it is more extraordinary than vast thing black and poised like a crow over the moon, but only because it's more circumstantial, and because it has corroboration. Do I think it more extraordinary than vast poised thing black as a crow over the moon? Mr. H.C. Russell, who was usually as orthodox as anybody, I suppose, at least he wrote F-R-A-S after his name, tells in the Observatory 2-374 one of the wickedest or most preposterous stories that we have so far exhumed. That he and another astronomer, G.D. Hurst, were in the Blue Fountains near Sydney, New South Wales, and Mr. Hurst was looking at the moon. He saw on the moon what Russell calls one of those remarkable facts which, being seen, should be recorded, although no explanation can at present be offered. That may be so. It is very rarely done. Our own expression upon evolution by successive dominants and their correlates is against it. On the other hand, we express that every era records a few observations out of harmony with it, but adumbratory or preparatory to the spirit of eras still to come. It's very rarely done. Lashed by the phantom scourge of a now passing era, the world of astronomers is in a state of terrorism, though of a highly attenuated, modernized, devitalized kind. Let an astronomer see something that is not of the conventional celestial sights, or something that is improper to see, his very dignity is in danger. Some one of the corralled and scourged may stick a smile into his back. He'll be thought of unkindly. With a hardihood that is unusual in his world of ethereal sensitivenesses, Russell says of Hirst's observation, he found a large part of it covered with a dark shade, quite as dark as the shadow of the earth during an eclipse of the moon. But the climax of hardihood on impropriety